At noon on Wednesday, the 7th of June, 1967, the 28th day of Iyar, in the year 5727, Israeli soldiers re-entered the old city of Jerusalem and prayed at the western wall of the temple. While dead Jordanians littered the streets, the Jews were once again in possession of the entire city for the first time since the Roman Titus destroyed the temple 1,900 years ago. Near the tower of King David's tomb, the triumphant Israeli defense minister, Moshe Dayan, said, "We have returned here never to part with Jerusalem." And wrote on it a simple prayer, which he then placed in a crevice of the western wall. For the Israeli Prime Minister, Levi Eshkol, assurances and gestures of goodwill were made to those others concerned with the fate of the holy places. It was here, halfway through the Six-Day War, that the emotions of all Jewish people found deepest expression. Here at the Western Wall, Kotel Marvi. But the campaign began very differently. Provoked beyond endurance, irritated by continual terrorist raids, her sea access to the east once again denied her. Early on Monday, June 5th, the Israeli Air Force struck a first and overwhelming blow against her threatening Arab neighbors. In a matter of minutes, the air forces of Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and Jordan were destroyed. Then, under clear skies, Israel's Citizens' Army repeated once more her almost miraculous victories. Deep into Sinai, Gaza, the Syrian hills, the west banks of the Jordan, they paused only to pray. Over the lonely desert outpost of Sharm el-Sheikh, whose seizure by the Egyptians had finally provoked the Israelis, the Magen David flew once more. By the end of the week, Israel, by force of arms, had increased her land area nearly fourfold, and her propaganda machine was just as skilled as her armed might.
Or at least as far as war between him and our forces is concerned. He is a paper fighter. But the tragedy is that in order to prove that he is only a paper fighter, one has to go to his war. As long as it's on the paper, he is a tiger. And it's a tragedy. It's a common tragedy because it's a tragedy for the forces, for our forces, for the Egyptian forces. You can imagine the thousands of soldiers of the Egyptian troops that were recruited by conscription, by compulsion, that is a great tragedy for them. But of course the comical part of it is the leadership. When you think about the Egyptian leader like Nasser and the other leaders that committed themselves and joined him, and the way that they boasted before, and committed all their forces of Sheikh Hussein, of all people, he could have been much better off, I should say, if he just stayed away. And he rushed to Cairo and he signed the agreement and he put the troops under the Egyptian command and all of them went forward. It's coming. the way they did it. But so it's a combination of a tragedy for the people that had to do it, and it's a probably tragedy for us that we have to face such leaders that take such a step. So by mentioning that the Egyptian troops fought this time much better, I didn't want to say that their leaders did much better this time. I think that they were just comical this time that they started this war.
For Moshe Dayan, the Arab leadership might well be comic. Nasser might well be a paper tiger. But paper tigers use real bullets, lob real mortar shells, fight with real tanks, inflict real damage. On the first count, 679 Israeli soldiers lost their lives in that 1 week. 2,563 were wounded. In Jerusalem, 15 Israelis died and over 500 were wounded. The cost of lives in terms of modern war might well seem small, but for thousands of families, the 6 days brought disruption and sorrow. And to Israel's fabric, the buildings, homes, factories and settlements, the damage and destruction was also grave. People in Tel Aviv might well have scurried for air raid shelters, fearful of raids which thankfully never happened. But the city was in the range of Jordanian guns. In Jerusalem, 3 days' bitter fighting took its toll on hospitals, schools, and buildings. And the countryside wasn't spared either. The Syrians set field after field ablaze, and herds fell victim to Egyptian fire. For Israel, the 6 days' war, despite overwhelming victory, has meant millions and millions of pounds worth of damage. It is to make good this damage that the JPA Emergency Fund has been established. The JPA's concern today, as ever, is with the refugees, the many hundreds of thousands it has already helped to settle, the thousands who might yet come. JPA money is not for tanks and guns, but for homes and food and clothing. In Israel, the people are giving their blood. In Britain, what is required is money. An Israeli soldier said, "Everyone in this country is in the army, but in peacetime we get 11 months' leave." Today in Israel, although the guns have for the moment fallen silent, it is not yet peacetime. While the soldiers man the frontiers, Israel must endeavor to return to normal to win a just peace. Only when the men come home and the threats are finally removed will the words of the prophet Isaiah be possible. And he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword unto nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Lo yiso goy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu aud milchomot.